The ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel was a magnificent sight, as if lifted from a dream of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung suspended from above, their sparkling light dancing across the polished marble floor, creating a dazzling display of wealth and power. The soft murmur of conversation from the attendees, all dressed in their finest attire, from tailored tuxedos to shimmering evening gowns, blended with the gentle music from a string quartet playing in a far corner of the room. The air was charged with energy, but beneath the surface lay an undercurrent of anticipation, as if everyone knew that this annual charity gala was more than just a social event. This was where the nation's most powerful figures gathered. Business moguls with sharp eyes and discreet smiles, celebrities always ready to attract the cameras, and journalists with notepads tucked away in their pockets, all were present to support a fund dedicated to underprivileged youth. But beyond the noble cause, this was also an opportunity for them to assert their status, to be seen and heard in a world where reputation and influence were everything. In a quieter corner, away from the dazzling lights of the crowd, Barron Trump sat quietly beside a family friend. At just 18 years old, he already possessed a towering stature, over 6 feet tall, making him stand out even when he didn't intend to. His dark suit fit him perfectly, accentuating his naturally serious demeanor, but it wasn't his appearance that drew attention, it was his sharp blue eyes, which shone with an unusual calmness, as if he were accustomed to standing on the sidelines of chaos. He was here at the invitation of the family friend, a quiet gesture to introduce him to a new social circle, but unlike many other attendees, Barron seemed uninterested in the spotlight. He simply sat there, observing, his hands resting lightly on the table, his expression revealing no emotion. The party proceeded smoothly, like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. Waitstaff moved between the tables with flawless grace, carrying trays of delicate appetizers, petite pastries, and champagne flutes that sparkled with golden light. Laughter echoed here and there, mingling with warm conversations about business, art, and upcoming charitable projects. But as the night wore on, the attention of the guests began to shift toward the evening's main highlight, the keynote speech. The journalist invited to speak was a well-known figure in the independent media, a name everyone recognized for their sharp wit and unapologetic opinions. They were respected by some for their boldness but criticized by others for their occasionally over-the-top remarks. News of their speech had been announced weeks in advance, and now, as the host stepped onto the stage to introduce them, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Conversations quieted, glasses were gently placed on tables, and all eyes turned toward the podium. Barron leaned back slightly in his chair, a small but deliberate movement. His expression remained unchanged, as if he was waiting for something but not letting anyone guess his thoughts. The journalist stepped onto the stage, flashing a confident, captivating smile. They wore a sleek black suit, perfectly tailored to enhance their powerful presence and natural poise. The audience responded with polite applause, but there was a hint of tension in the air. Would they cross the line tonight, as they often did? The journalist began their speech with a relaxed tone, intimate like a casual conversation. They joked about the city's notorious traffic. I swear I spent half my life stuck between yellow taxis and never-ending roadworks, making the audience laugh, breaking some of the initial tension. Then, they told a humorous story about a past mishap, when a champagne tower collapsed at a similar event, causing the whole room to erupt in laughter. In that moment, the party seemed no different from other high-profile events, polished, predictable, and safe. But then, their tone changed. General comments about politics and culture gradually turned into sharper criticisms. They mentioned famous political figures, mocking their quirks or public blunders. Some people think leadership is standing in front of a mirror and complimenting themselves every morning, they said with a mischievous smile, causing some in the crowd to nod in agreement, while others exchanged glances, their smiles becoming forced. The journalist's attention quickly shifted to Donald Trump. We can't talk about the world without mentioning the man who turned orange into the new black. They joked, their tone light but laced with implication. Laughter erupted from one corner of the room, but not everyone joined in. Whether you love him or hate him, you have to admit he's the gift that keeps on giving for people like me, always something to write about, to talk about, to laugh about. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some laughed heartily, while others shifted in their seats, their eyes betraying a hint of discomfort. Barron sat quietly at his table, his eyes still fixed straight ahead. His expression remained unchanged, like a statue carved from calmness. Whether the journalist noticed his presence or not, they did not show it, at least not yet. The jokes continued to flow, each one sharper than the last. The journalist moved on to analyze Trump's policies, the controversial tweets, and even the public appearances. The laughter in the room began to dwindle, replaced by a sense of unease creeping among the attendees. But the journalist had no intention of stopping. And of course, they said, pausing slightly for dramatic effect, their tone still cheerful but their eyes flashing with a mischievous glint, we cannot forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation. I mean, let's talk about Barron. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Heads turned towards Barron, who remained motionless, his face showing no emotion. The stage lights seemed to automatically focus on him, as if the room itself wanted to illuminate his reaction. The journalist continued, their tone still light but their words carrying a clear sarcasm. Imagine growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by marble everything, while your dad tweets about coffee and the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must build character, right? The attempt at humor fell flat. A few nervous chuckles came from the crowd, but most of the audience sat in stunned silence, shocked by the journalist's audacity. The light from the crystal chandeliers shone down, highlighting Barron's serene face. He didn't move, his hands still resting lightly on the table, his gaze fixed on the journalist. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his reaction. But what he did next would astonish everyone. The silence in the ballroom became heavy, almost suffocating. All eyes were on Barron Trump, the young man unexpectedly thrust into the center of attention he did not seek. The journalist's sarcastic remarks still hung in the air, sharp and provocative, like an arrow shot but not yet knowing if it would hit its target or fall uselessly. The crowd waited, some with curiosity, others with anxiety, but Barron did not react as they expected. He did not shrink under the pressure, did not glance around for an escape. Instead, he sat completely still, his face calm to the point of being almost enigmatic, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table as if nothing in the world could shake him. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Each passing second was a test of the audience's patience, and the tension in the air became palpable, like a violin string pulled to its limit. A few attendees exchanged anxious glances, their fingers unconsciously tightening around their champagne flutes. The journalist, standing on stage, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. Their confident smile wavered slightly as their gaze swept over Barron's table. Perhaps they had expected a forced laugh, a dismissive shrug, anything to break this silence. But instead, they were met with a silent, unspoken challenge. Barron's calmness was not indifference. It was something deeper, more powerful, a statement that needed no words. His presence, though understated, was commanding, seeming to permeate the entire room, overshadowing even the brilliant light of the crystal chandeliers. The room, which just minutes before had been filled with laughter and conversation, now sank into an uncomfortable stillness. It was as if everyone, even those who had chuckled at the journalist's jokes, suddenly realized the weight of the words that had been spoken. A small whisper broke the silence as someone near the stage turned to say something to their neighbor. The journalist cleared their throat, trying to regain control. "Tough crowd, huh?" they muttered into the microphone, accompanied by a forced smile, but no one responded. The tension enveloped the room like a thick fog, making everyone's breathing seem heavier. And then, Barron moved. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed his chair back. The sound of the chair legs scraping lightly on the marble floor rang out, small but clear, like a drumbeat marking the beginning of something significant. He stood up, his tall frame immediately drawing every gaze. At over 6 feet, Barron was an imposing figure, not just physically, but also with an unexpected aura of maturity that belied his 18 years. He looked out at the crowd, his blue eyes sweeping across the room before settling on the journalist, his gaze sharp but not hostile. He said nothing, but his presence alone was enough to silence any remaining whispers. Barron stepped away from the table, each step calm and deliberate, heading straight towards the stage. The crowd watched, eyes wide with a mix of astonishment and anticipation. The journalists stood on the podium, motionless, their earlier confidence dissolving like mist before the sun. No one knew what he would say or do, but everyone sensed that this moment was about to belong to him. When Barron reached the edge of the stage, he stopped, a few steps away from the podium. The crowd held its breath, the tension in the air almost tangible. Then he spoke, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the silence like a sharp blade. "Thank you for your insight," he began, his tone calm but firm, surprising both the audience and the journalist. There was no trace of anger, no sign of indignation, only a strange control that seemed beyond his years. "I grew up watching people make assumptions about me, about my family, and about my life, Barron continued, his gaze not leaving the journalist. For some, it's almost a game, a way to fill in the blanks when you don't know the whole story. And I understand. We are public figures. It comes with the territory. The room was utterly silent, captivated by the clarity and maturity in his voice. Those who had laughed earlier now sat motionless, their eyes reflecting a mix of confusion and shame. But there's something important that often gets overlooked, Barron said, his tone shifting slightly, a subtle intensity beginning to emerge. Behind every headline, every joke, is a person with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own story. You might think you know me because of who my father is, but the truth is, you don't know me at all. The journalist, who had been gripping the edge of the podium to stay composed, now looked visibly uneasy. Barron's words were not an attack. They were a mirror, reflecting back the weight of what had just transpired. What I've learned, Barron said, pausing slightly for emphasis, is that respect doesn't always have to be earned to be given. Sometimes, respect is something you offer freely, especially when you don't know someone else's story. A small wave of whispers rippled through the crowd, but Barron wasn't finished. He turned to the audience, his voice still steady but filled with quiet conviction. We live in a time where tearing each other down has become too easy. Words have power. They can hurt or heal, divide or unite. And I think we all could use a little more of the latter. The crowd was spellbound. Barron's calm resolve carried a weight far beyond his years, as if he were speaking not just to this moment, but to something larger, a universal truth. He took a step back, his gaze once again locking with the journalists. I hope this gives you something to think about, he said softly, his voice free of malice, only a quiet strength that left the entire room stunned. Barron turned and walked back to his seat. The sound of his shoes tapping lightly on the polished floor was the only noise in the stunned silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The journalists stood there, frozen, their earlier arrogance completely evaporated. But as Barron sat down, a tentative applause started from the front. It quickly spread, like a fire igniting from a spark, and within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, erupting in thunderous applause. Some clapped out of admiration, others out of relief after the tension that had just passed. The journalist remained on stage, trying to force a smile, but it was clear that the moment no longer belonged to them. Barron sat quietly at his table, nodding politely to those around him, not out of humility or shyness, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Within just a few hours after the gala, the moment had spread everywhere. Attendees, with their phones discreetly tucked in their hands, had quietly recorded Barron's speech, and now, the footage flooded social media like a storm. Tweets, Instagram stories, and TikTok clips circulated rapidly, capturing the essence of the evening with varied captions, from admiration for Barron's composure to harsh criticism of the journalist's misplaced humor. Barron Trump just taught an entire room a lesson in respect, wrote one viral tweet. A post from a celebrity present at the event stated, "Whatever you think of his family, this young man gave us something to reflect on." By the next morning, the story had made its way onto major newspapers and television channels. Some commentators praised Barron's maturity, calling it a defining moment for someone who had lived much of his life under public scrutiny. Others focused on the journalist's ethics, questioning whether public figures, especially young ones like Barron, should be targets for such mockery. Editorials debated fiercely, with one side arguing for free speech and the other emphasizing the importance of sensitivity and responsibility. The journalist, facing a wave of backlash, issued a statement the following day. Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be used responsibly. Last night, I crossed a line, and I apologized to Barron Trump for my words. However, not everyone was quick to accept the apology. Television talk shows, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with heated discussions. Some viewed Barron's speech as a necessary call for civility in an increasingly polarized world, while others saw it as a poignant reminder that even public figures are human beings deserving of respect. But Barron, at the center of this media storm, seemed unaffected. He returned to his daily life with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his response at the gala. Those who knew him said he barely paid attention to the uproar, focusing instead on his studies and personal interests. His indifference was not arrogance, but an inner confidence, a belief that what he had said was enough, and he didn't need to chase attention to prove it. Even if Barron moved on, the lessons from that night continued to resonate. The story transcended the ballroom of the Fairmont Grand Hotel, weaving its way into discussions at family dinner tables, in classrooms, and in offices. People didn't just talk about the drama of the event, they talked about the deeper implications it left behind. Barron's calm and thoughtful response had struck a chord with thousands, not just those who were present at the gala, but also those who watched the viral footage online. In an era dominated by outrage and knee-jerk reactions, Barron's choice, to meet provocation with composure and perspective, was rare and noteworthy. Many began to reflect on themselves, asking how often they paused before unleashing hurtful words, how often they chose to build up rather than tear down. For some, the event was a stark wake-up call. It's too easy to demean others in the name of humor or entertainment, but the consequences can be more profound than we realize. Parents turned the moment into a teaching tool for their children. Videos of Barron's speech were brought into classrooms, where teachers used them to discuss respect, empathy, and the importance of standing up for oneself without belittling others. He didn't yell, he didn't insult, one teacher remarked, but he still made everyone listen. That's real strength. Students were encouraged to think more deeply about how they communicate, about how words can shape relationships and the world around them. But the greatest impact of that night lay in its ability to connect disparate people. In a rare moment, individuals from opposing political parties and different social strata found common ground in their admiration for Barron's maturity. Not because of his last name, not because of his father's legacy, but because he had shown that respect and empathy still have a place, even in the face of ridicule. It was a reminder that dignity isn't something granted by others. It's a choice each person makes for themselves. As the conversations continued, one message became clear: words can wound, but they can also heal. How we choose to use them makes all the difference. Barron's actions didn't just defend his own dignity, they sparked a wave of collective reflection, a call for all of us to reconsider how we treat one another. The story of Barron Trump at the charity gala is more than just a memorable event. It's a powerful reminder of the power of words and the value of respect. By choosing to respond with composure, kindness, and integrity, Barron showed that even in the most tense moments, it's possible to rise above. Let his example be a lesson to us all. Your words have power. Use them wisely, whether with friends, strangers, or those you disagree with. Choose respect and empathy, for those are the things that can change the world, one moment at a time. If this story made you reflect, keep it going. Stories like this don't just inspire, they challenge us to be better. Let's keep the conversation alive. If you felt this story touched your heart or made you think, hit the subscribe button to stay updated with more meaningful content on our channel. We'll continue to bring you thought-provoking and inspiring stories that help you see life from new perspectives. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this story resonated with you the most? Have you ever experienced a similar moment where composure and respect became your strength? We'd love to hear your reflections and keep this conversation going together.